and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we're releasing a bonus episode. And before I go any further, just want to say there will be a bit of profanity in this episode, so if you have sensitive ears or those around you who you don't want to hear profanity, I would turn this off right now and wait for the next episode. This is my recent appearance on the Exercise is Bullshit podcast, hosted by my good friend, Logan Herlihy. This was episode 9 of his new project, the Exercise is Bullshit podcast. This was released on November 26, 2024, and is titled Client Programming with Casey Ruff. Like I said, Logan is a really good friend of mine. He moved to the Salt Lake area briefly, so we were able to meet in person. I got to know him through the gym that we were both attending as well, the Refinery, which is an amazing spot to work out here in the Salt Lake area. Unfortunately, he's had to leave the Salt Lake area and he moved back to Minnesota, I believe. But we were also able to interview Logan on our show back on episodes 512 and episode 645. The thing I really like the most about Logan is that he's willing to confront our own industry and bust a bunch of myths that pertain to fitness and nutrition and things like that. It's also fun to reflect back on recording this episode because we recorded this a while ago. I think this was about a year ago that we recorded it. And just thinking back on some of my responses at the time would actually be a little bit different now with things that I've learned and progressed my thinking on. But I'll let you listen to this episode. I hope you really enjoy this episode of Exercise is Bullshit with my friend Logan Herlihy, released as a bonus here on Boundless Body Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Exercise is Bullshit. I'm your host, Logan Herlihy, and obviously, as we know, this acronym changes a little each week. This week, it's going to be bros utilizing logical lifting and science-based heuristics to inform our training. So I'm so excited to be joined today by Casey Ryan Ruff, host of the Boundless Body Radio podcast, also the owner of Boundless Body. Casey, why don't you say hello and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello. Yeah, absolutely. I wish I would have known that exercise is bullshit before this morning. I went to the gym that you and I go to, and I really trashed my upper body this morning. So I could have, I guess, saved myself if I'd have known exercise is bullshit. So.
Yeah. So obviously, taking the piss a little bit there, as our friends across the pond say. But no, I think it's important that there's so much BS in the industry, and just really trying to cut through some of that. And that's why I wanted to have you on today, because I know you're an evidence-based practitioner. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about your story? How did you get into fitness? Obviously, all of these stories, I'm sure, are becoming redundant. Most of us have a very similar story of how we got in here, but it's still interesting to me to hear, kind of what was the why behind your starting to train? How'd you get into the fitness business and then eventually become a trainer and start the business that you have now?
Yeah, no, I love that messaging, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think there is a lot of bullshit out there and a lot of ways that people can make a ton of money by selling things that may or may not be very effective or evidence-based. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's interesting to hear other people's stories. I was interested in sports as a kid. I loved ice hockey, fell in love with our local hockey team here in Salt Lake. And, played hockey at a young age, got into cycling at some point. I was lifting weights in middle school. I kind of felt like the chubby kid. And I remember one time I got in a fight that I didn't want to get into. And I just always kind of used that as fuel for like motivation to kind of get stronger. So I would have all the, weightlifting charts and different exercises, taped up on my unfinished basement. And I bought like cheap, weights and everything and lifted through middle school. So it was always an interest to me. By the time I was in college, I was studying architecture. I thought I wanted that to be my career. And I joined a corporate gym here in the Valley that had just opened up. And it was a really nice gym based out of Minnesota, you will know very well. And, as I was watching the personal trainers, I thought it looked interesting what they were doing. And they were using heart rate monitors quite a bit. And I was very familiar with heart rate monitors because I used that in my cycling training for a long time. I knew how to optimize the heart rate monitors that were out and collect different data and create different programs based on that kind of thing. And so I went into the office of the manager to ask what I needed to do to be a personal trainer. He told me which certification to go get. So I hit the books pretty hard for a few months and got my certification. And that was kind of it for me. That was in March of 2007. So coming up on about 17 years. So the type of training, obviously as a personal trainer, you learn how to strength train people. My specialty at this club was learning how to use metabolic carts, which would actually measure people's metabolic rates, whether they were resting or whether they were doing exercise. So we think classically of like a VO2 max test where somebody's being ramped up on a bike or a treadmill. We increase their intensity and then we measure, how many calories they're burning, how much air is being exchanged in the body, and also how the body is utilizing fat versus carbohydrates. And so that was kind of my specialty. I was in charge of that program in the West region. admin of my club. And so I would travel around to the different clubs and train other trainers on how to use these carts and interpret the results. And yeah, it really kind of changed the way I looked at nutrition, the way I looked at cardiovascular, that we even call it cardiovascular training is kind of interesting, like aerobic, anaerobic, however you want to call it, that type of training. And yeah, eventually I found the work of Dr. Doug McGuff, eventually, who had been finding the work of all kinds of different people that you are very well aware of, who kind of started the Nautilus company and learned how to do strength training in kind of a different way called high intensity training. And it really just changed the way I do my strength training as well. So, you know how it is in this field. You're always learning and unlearning and finding, things that have, been true and fallen away or fallen out of favor. And you kind of relearn those things. And, if you can get really good at utilizing those with your client and know how to apply the right tool at the right time for the right person, you can really get really good results. So that's kind of where I am with that.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to hear a little bit more about your evolution as a trainer and maybe when you started practicing and using HIIT, because I think it's again, a common story that we've heard, especially with a lot of people in our sub niche of the field is, I was doing things for a long time this way. And then I realized, oh, well, there's probably a smarter way to do things. So before we jump into that, though, I'd love to hear a little bit more about this metabolic cart thing, because that was something that we obviously utilized in the strength and conditioning department at my college that I went to in Wisconsin at River Falls for my master's there. And those things are a pain in the ass. So I can't imagine like utilizing that in a health club environment. Is that something that's still around, or was that like a limited thing that they did for a while? Because it's just they're such a pain in the ass to work with. I just can't imagine people really wanting to use them on a regular basis.
So yeah, that's a really good question. Whether the ones that we were using were like 100% exact accurate, like you would find at a university, it's questionable. I thought that generally speaking, they gave us really, really good results. The company that we were using did a really good job building units that were very portable. And so when I say metabolic cart, I really mean like it was a cart that you would kind of push around, and the footprint was maybe, a few feet by a few feet, and it would just stand up and have a laptop and a small box, little black box that would connect, and we'd connect that to an umbilical cord that would connect to a mask on a person's face, and it would collect the air that was traveling in and out. And like I said, I thought the results were very consistent over using them, for 13 years of my career and using them at other clubs and with other people and training people. Like I thought they were pretty reasonable to be able to use. We also had the advantage that the company that we were going with, their metabolic analyzers would not just measure oxygen, but they'd also measure carbon dioxide. And a lot of analyzers out there don't take that last step. And so they can't really tell you very much about what substrate you're burning. They can't really tell you if you're burning fat or carbohydrate because it produces a different amount of carbon dioxide in the exhale. But yeah, again, the company that we were using was really good with that. And eventually the company I was with bought this company. So we owned that technology. They were able to produce that technology fairly repeatable. I think we got one batch of these analyzers that was really bad, but besides that, all the rest of them made a lot of sense. And you could really just tell what somebody was doing either with their exercise or with their diet. So if, for example, we were measuring a resting metabolic rate on somebody who had been a chronic dieter and who had been doing like way too much, again, of that quote unquote cardiovascular exercise, maybe running or cycling too much, we would already know this, but as we were measuring their metabolic rates would be greatly suppressed, meaning they would be burning far less calories than we would have expected for somebody in their same age, height, weight, and gender, because they were burning excessive amounts of calories, not fueling with excessive amounts of calories. And so you get this like kind of metabolic lowering effect with people. The big thing that I learned, again, with nutrition and with my cycling training is I learned, like every cyclist and endurance athlete learns, is that to be able to perform at the highest levels, you need massive amounts of carbohydrates. And that's what I had been doing my entire career, is eating tons and tons of carbohydrates to fuel my performance while I was on the bike. And it was through using these carts and getting training from other people that were saying, no, actually, we're using fat to fuel our athletes. And we have world-class Ironman triathletes, for example, that were not using carbohydrates. They were eating, 50 to 60 calories an hour on the bike as they were doing these intense and very long exercises, because they were using their fat storage to be able to fuel their exercise rather than using their carbohydrate storage to fuel their exercise, which most people can relate to the idea of bonking, where you go out on a run or a ride or something, you don't fuel before, maybe you go a little too hard and all of a sudden you just like run out of gas. Like I was very familiar with that. And so by changing the diet and changing the metabolic rate and how people were utilizing fat calories versus carbohydrate calories, you could really increase somebody's endurance. They could be able to go much longer. And that was certainly my experience, where I was eating tons and tons of carbohydrates. If I went for longer than an hour, I would need to refuel with more and more, which made my stomach hurt. Now I can go ride for several hours, and I don't even think about food, whether I eat before or after or during. It doesn't really matter. I hardly ever do. So that was a big learning as far as the metabolic carts go. What I took away from that.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Do you know, does and the company we're talking about is Lifetime Fitness based out of Minnesota. Do they still use those metabolic carts?
I believe they do. I mean, to use these carts, you're standing on like next to somebody on a treadmill who is breathing heavily through a concentrated thing on a mask. And so even before the gym closed down and put us on unemployment, that program had been shut down during the pandemic for, weeks before the gym shut down. So I believe they brought it back eventually, but it was one of the first things to go because, at the time probably wasn't the best thing to do.
Sharing hoses and tubes. Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's interesting to me. I guess there's a huge market for that just with endurance athletes in general. I'm just so far removed from that subculture that the idea of somebody following me around with a metabolic cart in the gym just seems kind of preposterous. But I'm sure if you're trying to maximize your output and seeing what kind of utilization that you're having from your macronutrient intake, it definitely makes sense. So just super interesting though. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about, now you've already mentioned you've been a trainer for about 17 years now. What is your style? What was it like when you first started? What kind of certification did you get originally? And then how has it kind of evolved over the years? You mentioned sort of making that transition to HIIT. A lot of our listeners may be familiar with Doug McGuff and Body by Science and that kind of light bulb moment that happens from reading that book. But I'd love to just hear what your journey was like with that and how it's kind of evolved over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first certification that I was told to get was NASM, which I believe is a fairly widely accepted one. It was the kind of standard for that company at the time. And so I went out and got that. I enjoyed it. I definitely learned a lot from it, learned a lot of anatomy and learned how different movements and different exercises. And they had lots of recommendations at the time with how many sets and reps and how you program different things. And, that I still kind of use somewhat of a skeleton of what they used for programming the way I think of things, maybe inside of a session, an hour-long session with somebody, how I'm going to structure that and make that make sense. I use a lot of their same principles that I enjoy, but, we were really trained to do what is called functional training. So hockey is a really good example. I'm a hockey player. And so my thinking was, okay, I play hockey. I know what hockey movements kind of look like and what skating looks like and slap shots look like. So let me just take those same ideas of movement and let me go to the gym and let me copy those movements in a gym the best I can. So not skating, but maybe I'm jumping back and forth, or maybe I'm like trying to do like stick handling, but I'm standing on a BOSU, or, maybe I'm swinging a weighted bar really heavily. And it really was Body by Science that kind of made the point that made a lot of sense to me, that like none of those things are ice hockey. Ice hockey is on ice. It's with, 9 of my other shit talking buddies and 2 goalies that we shit talk. And you play it in that certain context. You're on ice, you're skating, the puck weighs what it weighs, your stick weighs what it weighs, your equipment is what it is. It's in that context. And without those same circumstances, you really can't mimic that in the gym. And so the argument for HIIT training and that style is use the gym in a very safe way to make yourself really, really strong, and do that in a way that is the kind of minimal effective dosage, meaning like get the most out of the least amount of time. If you want to go above and beyond that, like you certainly can, but you're kind of talking about like diminishing returns at some point. And you use that to make yourself strong. And then you take all your extra time and go find some ice and go practice hockey in the context that hockey should be practiced in the proper context. And so that really shifted my thinking. And it's cool because it provides a different kind of framework that I know whether, I've got a 15-year-old motocross athlete that I train. I've got people that are in their 70s and 80s that I train. And everybody has different goals, but those principles can kind of apply across the board. And I know I can train all of those people effectively using those principles, maybe mix in a few different variables, different exercises. It can also depend on what equipment people have available to them. But if you use those core principles, you can really use them with anybody and see really, really great results. You can really make somebody stronger by, forcing that not forcing, but kind of getting to that progressive overload, giving sufficient recovery time, doing another workout. And then, especially if you're using machines and weight, you've got very objective numbers that you can measure. You can make sure that somebody actually is, objectively getting stronger. So that really shifted my thinking, the way that I work with people.
Yeah, I love that. And this idea of functional training is still just so ubiquitous in our industry. And you hear the term thrown around so often, and it just drives me fucking up the wall because, I'm just thinking of that 15-year-old motocross athlete that you mentioned and what kind of dumb things somebody who's trying to functionally train them might do. Like, let's put you on a weighted bike and, have you do backflips upside down, on a machine or something. Like, let's try to take this skill that is so specific and has to be practiced over and over and over again and try to add some weight to it. And it's just there's never really been any application where you've seen any sort of transfer, and just the basic laws of skill transfer let you know that that's not going to happen, right? If you're using a weighted bat, it's not going to transition over to a regular weighted bat when you actually go and swing, or a weighted hockey stick, whatever those things might be. But we still see it at the highest levels, and it's just mind-boggling to me. And when I have an athlete that comes in, or somebody who brings up these ideas of functional training, and specifically, it seems to be weighted instruments seem to be a big thing still within the industry. Like Titleist, has their golfing academy, and they use like heavier driver heads and stuff, which we know actually slow down your driver head speed. But you see the people at the highest levels doing it, and we neglect the fact that those people are so neurologically wired like to perfection that they can get away with it, right? So it's Bryce DeChambeau or whoever it is, Tiger Woods, those guys can use a heavy golf club, and they've done the skill so many times that when they go back to their normal golf club, it's not going to affect or impact their movement patterns. But if it's just you or me and we're trying to learn to swing a golf club, and we use a golf club that's 10 pounds heavier, like I already can't swing and drive a golf ball, right? Like, let alone doing some sort of stupid functional thing is definitely not going to help. So I love that. And I love that light bulb moment that a lot of people have, because, I was right there with you. I mean, that's the stuff I learned in high school and college. And it kind of makes intuitive sense when you think about it. Like, if I'm swinging a heavier bat, when I take the weight off, my bat should go faster. But that's just not how neurological movement patterns work. So it's super interesting to hear your story and hear how that's kind of evolved over the years. I'd love to hear kind of about your offering, because I think there's so many different sort of varieties of offerings within our umbrella of high intensity training, if you want to call it that. I've sort of shifted to just evidence-based or smart training, right? Because there's so much under the evidence-based umbrella too. What do clients get when they train with you with Boundless Body? Now, it sounds like it's hour-long sessions. What else is sort of incorporated in your program? I think that's always super interesting to hear how people package and sort of sell themselves as professionals.
Yeah, the way I sell myself is I tell people I'm really, really good at counting to 12. So everything's pretty much taken care of from there.
That's a great marketing campaign.
Yeah. Okay, really good question, even to put back on you. We know what this industry is like. We already have a kind of a stigma as personal trainers. And I've been really mulling over for several years, actually, since we started a company. We were unemployed during the pandemic, and the gym called us back, and we would be right back to 100% commission. And this was like in May of 2020. So like that was definitely not going to work financially for both my wife and I, who worked for the same company. So we ended up starting our own company, which is Boundless Body. And, since we started our company, we started our podcast, and I've wanted to come up with some type of a kind of a back end cookie cutter type program to give to people at a really high value, at a low cost, that somebody could, buy and benefit from. And, could make us kind of recurring revenue. As personal trainers, we're obviously a bit limited to our clients and our time in a day. Like, you can't work more than the 24 hours in a day. So we're limited in that way. And I've wondered how to do that. And I've not yet cracked that code. And maybe it's just because I see so many really poorly done and maybe kind of douchey, whatever content out there, that maybe I've got a resistance to it. So I haven't really cracked that code. One benefit that we have of owning our own company is we can be very, very nimble. So we don't have one simple offering. We work with people in whatever way they want to be worked with. So we basically have an hourly rate. And if people want to hire us for an hour a week, 2 hours a week, 30 minutes a month, like we work with people in whatever parameters that looks like. And, we'll do an intake with people. Sometimes we do a movement screening. Sometimes we just have our, complimentary sit down, 30-minute, 60-minute, whatever kind of consultation to see what people are looking for, what they're after, make sure we're a good fit. And then from there, we really just customize everything to fit the client. So some people need a lot of hand holding, and they need us to explain things. And I always say that every coach or personal trainer at any time should be able to explain why they're doing something. Most of my clients don't care, right? I can do the programming on my side, show up with the program, take them through it, and they will not ask any questions like, what is this working? Why am I doing this? Why are we doing this many sets, reps? Why are we using this equipment? Whatever. They don't care. But I do say that every coach and trainer should be able to answer that question at any time if they're asked. So, I do a lot of work at people's homes where they have whatever setup they have. I have a portable kind of set of equipment that is, a few bands, some different just things that I can bring around. And whether we're training in somebody's garage or basement or on their porch or in a park on a tree, like we can work with all of that stuff. You and I, again, kind of mentioned that gym that we both go to. They graciously allow personal trainers in for a really good, favorable fee. And I can bring my people there and have a nice gym. And we just pay a little bit more to access their equipment, which is incredible. They've got a lot of amazing equipment. So yeah, our plans are very flexible. And the people that we work with also have lots of different preferences and things that they want. So the last client that I trained, he needs variety. If I do the same workout twice with that guy, he will fire me. And we've worked together now for like 14 years, 3 days a week. So when I'm programming for him, I need to make sure that we're doing different things, even if it's the same workout with different reps or a different order, different set, like that's his priority. And so it doesn't matter what I think is the very best program for him, evidence-based. He needs a variety. So we train him that way. The next client that I'm seeing after this is going to be at that gym. He couldn't care less about variety. We use his tonal when we're at his house, and I programmed workouts for him a year and a half ago. We run those same 4 or 5 programs just based on whatever he wants to do on that day. And when we go to this gym, we do the same exercises in the same order every time. He does not care. In fact, he doesn't want variety. So, I think it's interesting to cite the study. I don't know the details, but I just know a study was done where they took 2 groups of people, and one group, they did the same workout every single time for however long the study ran, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever it was. The other group, they gave them more variety in their workouts. And they found that the first group that did the same workout, they got the better results, but the second group was more engaged. The first group got really kind of bored with what they were doing. And so as trainers, you've got a lot of things to kind of consider when you're coming up with a program design. And it's one thing, again, to create like the very best program with the very best equipment and everything you have available. But if your person doesn't like it, if they can't do it, if they're not going to stick with it, that's not the best program. So what we try to do, attempt to do with our clients is to provide them the very best service, the most hands-on. I create all the workouts that I do if they want them in a software program that I can filter down based on whatever equipment we have available for that session. So they get a hard copy of the workouts that they like. They can see their progress along the way. And, one of our strengths, again, is to be really nimble and work with people in that way. And we also retain our people really well. So if people start working with us, they not only they not only appreciate the workouts, but hopefully we're doing a good job being their friends and supporting them and asking about their day. And so much of personal training is that it's the personal side of things. And so, by being a good therapist and counting to 12, you can kind of retain people a little bit more. So that's kind of what it looks like to work with us.
Yeah, I've got a few questions there. I think that's super interesting because, in the franchised model for the company that I work for, you obviously have to sort of niche down your offerings. It's become very clear, like in this competitive gym culture, that the more specific you are with whatever the offering is that you have, the more you're going to stand out among the marketplace, right? If you go to a place like Lifetime, they've really started to, and I can't speak for Lifetime specifically, but in general, those big box gyms, they offer everything, right? So essentially they offer nothing. right? You want to go to an expert who can give you advice on spinning. You don't just want to go to a spinning class at Lifetime. So you want to go to Cycle Bar. You want to go to one of these other places that just does cycling. So people, especially with the means to do it, are really starting to seek out these specific avenues, these niche down boutique studios. But I have found, just from talking to you and a couple other people, that the ability to be nimble, like you said, as a personal business offering is something that still works, right? Because people don't necessarily know what they're looking for when they're seeking out a personal trainer. If they come to me at the studio that I work at, we're very clear and concise with what we offer, and that's not for everyone. But to be able to be your own boss and to have the ability to say, like, hey, this is what we normally do. I see what your goals are. I see what you're looking for. I still think I can put together something for you. I just don't have the mobility or the ability to be nimble, like you said, to do those things. What does that structure look like for you? Like, do you find that that's always a good thing, or do you typically have like an offering that you bring to people, say like, hey, this is my general offering, 3 times a week, an hour each session. What are you charging for those sessions? What if they want to add on nutrition counseling? Like, how do you structure that pricing? I think that would be helpful for people who maybe are thinking about, going out and doing their own thing. Like, how do I actually charge for my services and make sure that I'm giving people what they want, but also being paid appropriately for my time? Because it's very, very easy, as I'm sure you know, to let an hour turn into an hour and a half, and then you're not getting paid for that extra half hour, or to want to offer to help somebody, but it's outside that normal time block. And that's not a bad thing, right? That's good customer service. But if you do it for every single person all the time, you quickly find yourself behind the 8 ball.
Such a great question, dude. Yeah. So you've got such a good point, and I think there's room for both, and I think we've got a little bit of each of those things. So with the being nimble, if we're talking like general strength training, pretty much everybody can use general strength training, and again, from there we just work with people's parameters and what they want to do. Our hourly rate is $129 an hour, and so that encompasses, again, whatever people want to do for that hour. Our schedules are pretty tight, so we do a good job, like staying on top of that. So yeah, again, as far as like general strength training, we can pretty much help everybody. Where we kind of have our niches, my wife is really good with Pilates. She's comprehensive Pilates trained, and we've got a really good reformer downstairs where she works in our finished basement that we finished out to be a private studio. And also her niche is doing something called the Rossiter system, which is a kind of stretching, very similar to Rolfing, if you're familiar with Rolfing, but she's actually like standing on people in different ways and on different joints as they are moving themselves through different stretches to work on myofascial tissue. So that is definitely something that is very niche. It's very esoteric. Not a lot of people even know about it. And it's really amazing. She gets incredible results. People that have seen chiropractors and physical therapists and have been in chronic pain for a long, long time, 1 or 2 sessions with her seem to like really like get people out of chronic pain, which is really amazing to see. I'm obviously very partial because she's my wife, but so that's part of where we kind of specialize. And the other part where we really specialize is my work with metabolic hearts and learning about nutrition really led me down the low carbohydrate, then the ketogenic, and then now the carnivore kind of path. And that's kind of the path that I've taken. So the first certification that I got during the lockdown when nothing was going on and we were unemployed and really confused was I went to a carnivore nutrition website and got certified as a carnivore meat-based kind of health coach, nutrition coach. So on top of my normal nutrition coach certification, that kind of took me one step further. So I am actually listed on a directory.
Who is that through, by the way, Casey?
It was through Dr. Sean Baker, who was the.
I was gonna ask, yeah.
Yeah, the initial.
Sean's great.
Yeah, he is really amazing. He just made his second appearance on the show. It'll be several months after this episode gets released on your show, but people should go check it out. He was just on Rogan this last week, and it was really, really good. That was the first time I'd ever heard about the carnivore diet, was him on Rogan, and I thought it was so ridiculous I turned it off halfway through the episode. I didn't even go back and listen to it until like earlier this year, even though I had been working for his company for a long time. So I had been listed as a coach on one of his websites, and since I jumped on really early after he offered the profile, I was one of the top rated coaches, and I was coaching people all over the world for the carnivore diet. So I just kind of tell people, like, I'm not the person who is, like yelling at vegans and telling them they're stupid on Twitter. I'm the one that people come to if you want to try a carnivore diet.
I am.
Yelling at vegans. Yeah, so that is also a very strange kind of specialty. You know what I mean? That definitely sets us apart. And if somebody comes to me and says like, hey, I want to work with a nice vegetarian offering, I just tell them like, that's awesome. You're barking up the wrong tree with me, but let's go find you somebody who can really help you, because I'm not able to do that. I've tried working with people with plant-based diets for ages and couldn't get any good results. And so let's go find you a smarter nutritionist than I am. But if you want to work with us in that way, we can. That's a way that we can specialize. I've got one guy who is pretty young. He's in his 30s. He's already on a statin. He's already on blood pressure medication. He told me the first day we started training about a year ago that he was already on the best nutrition plan. He's already eating tons of whole grains and vegetables, and I don't need to tell him anything about nutrition. I said, that's fine. I still train him every single week, and his weight has gone up and his body fat has gone up, and we just don't really talk about it. So, so those are, I guess, some of the ways that, again, we can be nimble, but we also have those specialties to say that we really concentrate on this. I can tell you about nutrition, but if you really want to know nutrition, we got to get to some of the low carb carnivore type stuff where I can really kind of hit my stride.
Yeah, no, I do like that idea of having specific focuses, like almost sub niches within your offering, right? So it's like, here's our main umbrella plan. This is going to work for 90% of people. If you want to take the holistic route and try this new avenue, we also specialize in that. But we're not going to push it on you. And I think that's something that, again, you can have the flexibility, because, in my current position, we just try to stay out of the nutrition space altogether. And I have my own beliefs and I have my own understanding of what I think is the best offering, which actually, funny side note, I did watch that episode with Sean Baker, who I think is awesome. And I'm thinking about maybe doing a World Carnivore Month in January. So
nice.
You and I might have to connect about that, and maybe you can give me some recommendations so I'm not just eating steak and eggs every single day, even though doesn't sound terrible now. Maybe about 2 weeks in, it would sound kind of terrible. Okay, so Casey, before we move on to how you think about programming, and I really want to dive a little deeper into that, because I think it's interesting to see the nuances with different trainers and their styles. I'd love to talk to you about one of the things I really want to focus on in this show is people with a scientific mindset, right? Changing their ideas over the years and not being completely dogmatic and locked in. And you've already touched on a few things that you've really made pretty big shifts on over the course of your 17-year career. I'm just wondering, is there anything from an exercise science, nutrition, whatever the perspective is, that over the last, say, 1 to 5 years, you made a complete 180 on, where if I'd have asked you at the time, you would have been dead set, 100%, this is the way that things are. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But now you've really sort of taken a dramatic shift in that particular area. Anything that sort of stands out to you?
I love that question. Yeah. I mean, I've personally been doing a carnivore diet for about 4.5, almost 5 years. So the biggest one to me is thinking that you don't need vegetables, for example, in a diet. I have had no real vegetable matter in almost 5 years. I haven't pooped in 5 years, so I don't know what that's all about, but no. And so that's like the biggest one. And once you're in this world, in this space in nutrition, you're swimming upstream, right? You're going against everything that everybody is saying. And so you have to be very good at the science, and you have to really dig into what people are saying. When every headline that comes out says that keto is going to give you a heart attack, or that, the latest one that meat is going to give you diabetes. You have to understand how these studies are done. It's ridiculous, dude. It's so dumb. And they're population-based studies, and they're only looking at one small thing, or the difference, the P ratio between the group that something bad happened, the group that something good happened, is not statistically valid. You have to know what you're saying. And I have to be very careful about saying things about cholesterol and what we know and what we don't know, and talking about fiber. Where did that science come from? Where did the idea that we need whole grains and vegetables come from? How was the religious side of things influencing that in the Seventh-day Adventist Church? There's just so much that you really need to dig into if you're going to go out and tell people that they can eat an all-meat diet. You'd better damn well know your science, and you better be willing to say what you think you know and what the science says and what it doesn't say. And so that's really helped me to take a more kind of scientific look at things. On the exercise side of things, in the last 5 years, just getting more into the idea that again, jumping on a treadmill and doing, an hour-long workout where you're huffing and puffing and sweating a lot, like it's really not that helpful for you. It's not going to do very much for most people and what their goals are. And that really strength training should be done with a certain level of intensity. And regardless of exactly how the details kind of shake out, what people are willing to do, the principles of strength training are the principles of strength training, and they're simple. They're not easy. They're not easy to do. My workout sucked this morning, but it is simple. And if you follow the right rules and follow the correct principles that we know work, you'll get the same results. And so that for exercise, that's been a huge thing, I would say. And maybe just one more that I'll throw out there just because it's kind of weird and different. One thing that I've really shifted my mindset on is footwear. And, the big bulky shoes that I used to wear have changed drastically. I only use very minimal footwear, try to be barefoot as much as possible. And that's really made a huge difference in my life. So that's another little weird lifestyle one. But as far as nutrition and exercise go, those are the two things that I've really kind of changed my mind about and involved with.
Yeah, and Casey also told me off air that he likes to sun his butthole for about 30 minutes every morning too. So he's kind of off the Richter scale a little bit. No,
I think it's a good idea. Everybody should try. I don't know.
No,
Science says.
I agree with a lot of the stuff you said there, and I've had similar shifts. Again, I'm not necessarily full blown like carnivore space, but I do think there is some, for lack of a better word, a massive amount of fuckery that's happened in nutrition science over the last 50, 60, 70 years. And it's sort of been built upon this house of cards, so to speak. And it's hopefully starting to shift, but it's just interesting to see the vitriol and the hatred that comes from people when you start talking about like, well, maybe big business and big agriculture doesn't have our best interest in mind. It's like, oh, you're yeah. So anyways, we don't have to go down that road because that's a totally different podcast worth, but let's start talking. You mentioned these principles of strength training here. Talk to me about how you think about programming for clients. How do you approach that programming? And what is your thought process right now? I'm sure it depends on what the person is looking for from a frequency perspective, but do you typically focus on full body? Do you like to do splits? What is the average person that's coming to you looking for? Are they trying to be a bodybuilder? Or are they just trying to feel better? Like, talk to us a little bit about how the average Boundless Body client looks when they come to you, and then how you think about putting their program together.
Excellent. That's an excellent question. I love thinking about these kinds of things. I'll start with a more like macro level. On a higher level, I'll just say also that like if you look at me, like I'm not much of a bodybuilder. I don't really work with a ton of bodybuilders. So if there's a population we don't work a lot with, I can give you a few principles. But bodybuilders are awesome at being bodybuilders, and they know everything about bodybuilding. So generally speaking, they're not going to seek me out for any of that. But on a macro level, yes, we're considering somebody's goals. We're considering whether they need both nutrition, counseling, or just the exercise. Generally speaking, when we're doing a workout with somebody, we've got plenty of time between sets and reps, so we can talk as much or as little as we like about other lifestyle things. And one of the things that I would consider is what type of goal does this person have? Do they have a time-based goal, or is this more like a general goal? A general goal is like, you're going to do this workout. There's no real kind of endpoint. It's just hopefully like constant progress, or even if it's just maintaining where somebody is very different than if somebody has a time goal. So for example, I've got a triathlete that is on the East Coast. We do virtual training twice a week, and we have to very much consider what her season is looking like and where she is in the phase of her season. So in endurance sport, we call that periodization. It would be the same in bodybuilding, where there's different things that you do in different periods of the year. So right now it's cold outside. She's not training. Her main race is not until the middle of summer. It would make no sense to do very specific training, very hard training specific to that event that's 7 months away. That makes no sense. This is a good time for her to rest and relax and recover and not run repeatedly and do different kinds of strength training things that work maybe in a different way that we would normally work. And as we're getting closer and closer and closer to her main event, now we need to get more and more and more specific to the things that she's going to be doing. So that's one thing to consider on the macro level. We also need to consider, how much time we're working with people. So we don't just work with people in 1 hour sessions. I've got several people that do half-hour sessions. In an hour session, I know I've got more time that I can do mobility work with somebody. I can maybe do some core work in a session with somebody. I kind of enjoy doing that. We've got more time to work on like ancillary muscles, biceps, triceps, smaller muscle groups, things of that nature. In a 30-minute session, all I'm concerned with is like, what's the priority? What's the biggest thing that we can do that gets the biggest bang for the buck? So I'm looking at what I would consider some way to do what I call like the big six. I've stolen that from many people, or the big five is, Body by Science calls it. Like, what are the pushing and pulling movements horizontally, vertically in the lower body that we can do a type of, way to activate all the biggest muscle groups and work that. That's my priority. So, with the splitting, it also depends on how many times somebody wants to work with me. So one example, I've got a family that I work with. They train 4 days a week. They want sessions 4 days a week. And so we have to have splits. The way our schedules work, they've got back-to-back sessions, which wouldn't necessarily be ideal. It just means that as a trainer, I've got to be very, very considerate of what moves I'm doing on what day so that they're not overloading, and that's a challenge too, because I could be training anywhere from 1 to 4 people in that family at a time, and each one of them has separate goals. And so you're always kind of balancing that type of thing. If people are doing 1 day a week, I want the priority. I want to get to the most important stuff that's going to accomplish the most in the least amount of time, and know that whatever, other stuff, core work, mobility, whatever, I can create a program and give that to them, and it's on them to take care of that on their own time. So that's kind of the way I think about kind of splitting things up. And then again, it's just being really pragmatic about what equipment do you have available, what does somebody like and not like, and how can I ride that line of balance between what's going to keep somebody really engaged and give them enough variety that they're interested in it, but also remembering that the principles are the principles, like we said, and we want, whatever we choose as a deadlift this week, we kind of want to do some type of a deadlift pattern once a week. I think that's a really important exercise as an example. So unless somebody has like really egregious movement pattern things that need to be addressed, I don't see a ton of those. If they do, we'll kind of program around that, and maybe we're doing more pulling movements than we're doing pushing movements. But for me, I'm sure you're kind of the same. When I got that first certification, that was the best day of my personal training career. I knew the most on that very first day because I knew exactly how somebody squats. I knew exactly how somebody deadlifts. I knew exactly how somebody pushes a weight overhead. And it's just that one way. And so you can jump in and correct 100 things. Oh, your toe is turned out by 2 degrees, or your knees aren't moving in the right direction. And it's like the longer you do this, the more you realize people move in so many different ways. I almost never correct somebody unless it looks like they're going to get hurt. That's pretty much the only time I'll step in and say that, like, okay, let's change this. Otherwise, I just kind of let people go. But yeah, that's kind of the way I think about my programming. When you appeared on my show, Boundless Body Radio, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to jump in there with a couple of things before you keep going. I love the idea of the movement pattern thing. I was actually talking with young, he's got his master's now. He's going to be a PhD student soon at Lehman College. His name's Max Coleman. And there's a whole line of research that's actually coming out now that's looking at performance as far as how you actually perform certain movements and whether or not it's correlated with better outcomes. And the preliminary research is showing that it's probably not, within reason, right? So a lot of those things that we seem to take for granted, as far as like, oh, there's a little bit of knee valgus and they're buckling in a little. It's like, yeah, it's probably just how their body works. And our bodies are so good at compensating for other movement patterns that we have. And there's certainly people who specialize in body movement and function. And I know a few of them that can look at somebody, just the way they're standing, and really break down, hey, there's some weakness on this right side of your body, which is leading to this pain on the left side of your body. And I am just not one of those people. So my main goal is typically, let's just make all the structures as strong as possible. And a lot of that stuff is going to work itself out over time. The other thing I wanted to ask quick before you keep going here is, what do you typically use for tracking for your clients? I know you mentioned maybe giving them programs, having physical printouts. Do you have a specific app that you like or prefer, or do you just do everything on Notes on Apple? Like, what are you using for tracking for people?
Yeah, great question. My wife is one of those people, by the way, who, like, I'll look at somebody and watch the way they walk, and she'll look at somebody and be like, oh, wow, can you believe he got hit in a car when he was 3 years old by a Toyota going 37 miles an hour? And it's like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, and she's right. Yeah. So I've had various different methods of tracking things over the years. I've also changed my mind several times about the value of tracking. I've gone lots of time where I never tracked anything. I felt like it was taking away from me being really engaged with that person and being intuitive with my training and saying, like, oh, okay, like, I feel like today we should do a little bit more pulling, versus like following a set plan. So yeah, I've used various different things over time. If nothing else, writing things down, and whether or not the client cares or wants those things is kind of up to them, but it helps me to stay organized. So I do take the time to track with most people most of the time. Again, if for no other reason that I can look and remember what I did with somebody, last week to make sure this week is, maybe a little bit different or make sure we're progressing. The software that I use is one that I vetted out. It was one that I got also very early in the pandemic. It had the specific feature that I really was looking for, which was the ability to filter down the exercises that I can provide based on what equipment people have. And so it's a really nice filter that I can click, okay, this person has dumbbells and they've got resistance bands and they've got a TRX. What am I looking at? And so I can click, find all of those, filter those, and use that to create programs. That was really valuable in the beginning of the pandemic because everybody was had whatever they had. You couldn't find exercise equipment, and whether somebody had, a nice gym setup, some cables, whether they had a few bands laying around, whether they had a health writer and a thigh master and some, workout videos from the 80s. We were able to work with all.
Sort by the thigh master.
We can sort by the thigh master. You can sort by the health writer. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, you totally can. And so, yeah, that was a cool feature that I really enjoyed. And yeah, it helped give some kind of structure to what I was providing for people. There's not an app, but there is an online platform, so people can log on. They can see the exercise. If I put weight or sets or reps or things like that, it's in there. If I have notes, I can put that in there. So there might be an exercise for a closed grip pull down, and if somebody's doing that at the gym that you and I go to, there's 10 different ways that you can do a pull down there. So I might say notes, it's on this machine, you used this much weight last time or whatever. And so clients can track that if they want. They can print out PDFs if they want. There's descriptions of all the workouts, which I really like. So it's not like video based, but at least it will show pictures and have really good descriptions. It's also cool because
what is the app? We still haven't actually mentioned what that is.
Workout Labs is the name of it. It's called Workout Labs. Yeah. So it's a good platform for a trainer. I paid for their lifetime membership so I can have as many clients as I want and I can send them as many workouts as I want. It's also really nice for templates. And so if I want to create a generalized workout program that I can just give to anybody if they ask, I can create that one time and plug and play into different people's accounts. And it just adjusts, based on some basic things that they have. So that's what I use to track. And I've really enjoyed it. I think it's been a really good kind of a program to use for at least what I'm doing.
Yeah, I love that. And that was actually going to be one of my questions was, how do you think about pre-made templates? Because I try to customize to the person that I have in front of me. And obviously we have specific equipment that we use at the studio that I'm at. But with virtuals especially, I think a good program is a good program. And for the most part, unless you have very, very specific goals, which a lot of times people that come to me just have very generalizable goals. I want to feel better, look better, things like that. A good workout is a good workout, right? And we know that we're going to rotate through it every 2 to 3 months anyway. So I may put 5 different people on similar versions of an almost identical program just based on what equipment they have available. And that's something I've definitely changed on over the years, where I used to write a specific program for every single person that came in, customized to them. And then, after a few years, I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, Bob and Tom could both do the same thing. They have very similar goals. We just need to adjust, or if somebody can't do a particular movement pattern based on some limitations, okay, well, let's substitute that exercise out for something they can do. So that's something I've definitely changed my mind on over the years. When you have somebody for that full hour, are you typically programming like a single set approach, or do you do multiple sets? How do you think about that interaction of volume and frequency when you're programming?
That's a great question. And yeah, well, I'll give you a quick example based on what you said before. But like yesterday, I did a consultation with some woman in my neighborhood. She said she's really motivated and she wants to buy some weights and wants a program. So I just reached out to her. I had a cancellation in my day anyway. So I just kind of did a free 1 hour session with her. She's got no experience with weights. She hates the gym. She doesn't want to look like an idiot. And she's just starting out. And so for her, I can drop in one of those, like very generalized programs. And you're right. Like, that's a good program. It's not a great, perfect, exact program, but it's something that's going to get her really great results. And, I've periodized it over time. And that's an example of where you could use something more general and people would get a benefit out of it. I know, of course. Okay, so inside of an hour-long workout, generally speaking, again, there's some variance to this, but if we're doing an hour-long workout, I want to spend the first quarter, third of the workout doing typically like core specific things to warm up. So I will generally have some type of a static core engaging activity, like maybe a plank. Maybe we flip it around and do some form of a bridge. Maybe we're doing side planks. Maybe we're doing bird dogs. Maybe we're doing dead bugs. Just something to kind of warm up and turn on and engage the middle part of the body. I really like to also incorporate things in different planes of motion. So let's get somebody twisting a little bit. Let's get somebody moving in the lateral plane a little bit. Just this is a generalized movement. It's not very heavy. It's just kind of, let's get the heart rate up. Hopefully we're engaging the core a little bit. Before we go to the major exercises, I will generally take a multi-set approach. I also think that depends on how advanced somebody is. So high intensity training, it's high intensity training. Like, as you know, like the intensity is quite high and it quite sucks. Like, it's not that fun to do. And so if I'm taking a newbie through that type of a workout, there's no way they're going to be able to handle that from the beginning. They don't even know what that feels like or what that could look like. And I don't want to scare somebody away. And I don't want somebody to be bedridden after their first session. And so generally speaking, we'll start with 3 sets. I'll probably count some reps, even though, the saying goes like we count reps, but reps don't count. At least it's something for you to like measure and track and, gives you a marker that somebody can shoot for, which is fine. And we're just coaching kind of basics. And over time, as I've been working with somebody longer and longer and longer, I'm starting to teach them like, okay, especially as you're getting to the last set, no matter how many sets we do, whether that's 1 set, whether that's 3 sets, 4, whatever is in their programming, but as we're getting to the last set, especially, I want you to get familiar with that feeling of that intensity, get familiar with the feeling of feeling anxious and the burning that's really intense in the muscles, and you get kind of shaky, or I see people try to speed up because they want to like get through it a little bit quicker. And I want somebody to pay attention to that, start to feel into that, and every time just kind of push into that just a little bit further, knowing that the body is really abhorrent to building muscle and making itself stronger. The way we evolved, that just wouldn't have made a lot of sense, because it would have made us more inefficient with our calories. It makes us burn more calories all the time. And in a world where we assume there's probably a little bit more food scarcity and calorie scarcity than we have today with this, influx of ultra processed foods, it's a good thing. But we need the body to go pretty close to its edge of what it can do, so that it knows that it has to be stronger. It has to build the bone density and the connective tissue and the muscle mass and all that stuff. So, over time, the more and more we're doing that, I'm trying to push people more and more in that end. And again, I'm just working with the time variables that they have. If we're doing a 20, 30-minute session, that might just be 1 set. If somebody has an hour, we've got time to give kind of a set 1 warm-up set 2, push a little bit further, set 3, let's go as close as you're willing to go to your kind of edge. And that can be done. And if we need to add a 4th set, if we need to add a drop set, if we need to do something to continue to push into that intensity, we can do that. But those are more advanced techniques, in my opinion, for somebody who's been doing this for a while,
Yeah, why don't you talk to me, because that was going to be my next question, about some of those, what we would call advanced overload techniques or finishers, however you want to look at them. When you're working with somebody who maybe is strapped for time and is only doing a 30-minute session, so maybe they're trying to fit in 6, 7, 8 movement patterns, and you're doing a single set of each. Are you incorporating some of those advanced techniques? Do you ever use those with your people that are maybe in hour-long sessions? Or how do you think about that when it comes to whether it's a drop set, you do heavy negatives? What are some of your tools in your tool belt that you're using to incorporate some of those intensifiers for people?
Yeah, another really great question. Intensifiers, I'm going to take that. That's good. I like that. I like to think about it that way. Yeah, I mean, anything is open. If you're talking about a 30-minute session once a week, like you've got to capitalize on your time. You've got to take that person to that edge, and you've got to squeeze in all of those priority exercises, squat pattern, deadlift pattern, rows, chest press, shoulder press, pull down. Like, you want to get to those in that time, and you really want to fatigue those muscle groups, you know what I mean? Like those multi-joint kind of movements that you're doing. And so really all of those are fair, and I'll try to use any of them that I can. A drop set, so maybe you're doing 1 set to failure, you're moving at a slow tempo, whatever that is, you get to the edge of pulling down maybe 100 pounds. Okay, well, let's set that down, take a 10-second break. I'm going to drop this to 80, keep going. in 30 seconds or a minute, you're going to fatigue again, take a little break. Okay, let's drop it again, maybe to 50 pounds, 60 pounds, whatever. That's fair. I will sometimes have people do an isometric hold, especially on a pulling movement where they're kind of getting the feel of like, I don't even know what it feels like to squeeze my back together. Well, let's hold at the end range and really get that feel. And now push for that every time. I really enjoyed using the different ranges of motion, working within those ranges of motion. So with pretty much every movement pattern, there's places in that movement where you're less mechanically advantaged and places where you're more mechanically advantaged. And so you can exhaust somebody in their least advantaged kind of range of motion and then move it to where they have more and move it to where they have more. And you can really leverage that to get good results. And so all of it is fair game. The name of the game is getting to deep intensity. However you do that, however many sets or reps it takes, in my opinion, the goal is to get to a very, very deep intensity. Maybe not a 10 out of 10 for difficulty if somebody can do that, but maybe it's damn close, or maybe it's an 8 or a 9 for what somebody's willing to do. So yeah, as far as advanced techniques, whatever gets somebody there is fair game, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that, and I'm on the same page with that. Let's talk about, as we wrap this up, Casey. Just because you've been in this industry for such a long time, what are some programming mistakes you maybe see from other younger trainers, people that are newer into the industry? Whether it's actual programming as far as like what kind of exercises they're doing, or it's simply how they're presenting themselves. I think one of the big things I see, and that's why I wanted to ask what you actually charge, is undercharging for your services, which I don't think you guys are doing at all. That's one of the higher price points that I've heard, and I'm sure you deserve every penny of it. I guess some words of wisdom from somebody who's been doing this for almost 2 decades, for somebody who's maybe newer to the industry, maybe thinking about branching off on their own, some parting knowledge for that person of mistakes you've made that you've learned from over the years.
Such a good question. Maybe this will be a little bit less conventional, but it's something I was actually thinking about today as I was at the gym training my client and watching another personal trainer. The programming is very important. What the exercises, the sets, the reps, all the technical things that we talked about, that is all very, very important. You should focus on all of that. And if you get the exact right workout and you don't care about your people and you don't ask about them and you are disengaged during your session, it doesn't matter any of those techniques. Like, they are not going to stick with you. They're not going to hire you. And again, I just saw it today. Like, there's a trainer, he's looking around, he's with his client's on his phone for part of it, and they're doing an exercise and kind of parked up on a machine. And this guy is not paying attention to anything. He's not talking to him. He's looking around. He's on his phone. Like, that to me is pretty unacceptable. Like, whatever route you want to go as far as programming, like, at the end of the day, like, a lot of different things can work for a lot of different people. And the point is, if you're doing anything, that's awesome. But what advice I would give to somebody, if you have all the technical knowledge in the world and you're not personable and you don't care and you don't have the skill of listening, you need to work on that first, because you're going to have a tough time retaining business. And I've learned a lot over the years. I've been wrong about a lot of things for a lot of my time, but I'm able to work with a lot of my same people for a lot of the same time because I give a shit and I care, and I'll talk to them and I want to know about their lives. And these people, at the end of the day, they're basically my family. You know what I mean? Like, the people I spend a shit ton of time with, I know more things about some people than probably their spouse does, because we spend so much time together. And so my advice for a new trainer is, like, keep learning, keep pushing. The techniques are important. Like, I never listen to music in my car. I always have a book or a podcast on. You need to keep doing that. You always need to be evolving in the way that you're learning your craft. And you really need to give a shit about the people you work with, because at the end of the day, they're writing your paycheck. And again, you can have all the technical knowledge, but if you're a shitty person or you don't care enough for your client, you're going to get fired and you're not going to have a chance to showcase your skills. So I think between that and just, if you are starting a business, just be patient. You know, it's going to take a lot of time and it's going to take a lot of hard work. And, you know, when I started training, probably similar to you, you're working split shifts. You're working all the times that nobody else wants to work because you're learning and you're getting those reps. But be patient, but also, again, be willing to learn from other trainers, ask them questions. That's, I guess, the way I would take that question.
Yeah, no, I really, really like that answer. And I think it's super important, and what a great lesson is being personable, right? First and foremost, and actually caring about your clients, I think is definitely an underrated aspect, because I've had that same experience, and I've seen that same trainer, obviously not the exact same trainer, but very similar experiences in some of the gyms that I've gone to over the years, where it's like, how is anybody even working with this person? And the most successful trainers, whether or not they agree with our modalities or they train people the same way, it's they care and they've cultivated relationships, and people are paying you a lot of money to not just train them, right? They could go find YouTube videos if that's all they cared about. They want somebody there who's going to encourage them and encourage their heart and empathize with them and be that sometimes their therapist, whatever it might be. It's a lot deeper than just counting reps, even though we joke about that sometimes. So I think that's fantastic advice. I'd love to just wrap up with letting people know how to contact you if they're interested, maybe in potentially working with you. Where can people find out a little bit more about you? Or your wife, have her step all over them and adjust their bodies.
Yeah, literally walk all over them. So the easiest place is our website, which is myboundlessbody.com. On the website, you can find all our social media. You can find our podcast called Boundless Body Radio. The episode we did with you, I believe it was 514. I can't remember, but we'll find the episode that we did with you. One of the very first things that you'll see as you're on the website is a book now button. So anybody is free to click that button and set up a 30-minute consultation. That's complimentary. We don't charge for that. And we really can talk to people about anything, whatever they like. If they want to talk about nutrition or exercise or other lifestyle factors, oftentimes the coaching that we provide is really just a mirror for somebody to talk things over and make their own decisions about stuff. And maybe we'll give some advice or whatever. But anybody can do that. They can find, again, all our social media stuff. But the main hub that people can go to is myboundlessbody.com.
That's great. Check it out. Follow on all socials, and definitely check out the podcast. I think it's great. You have so many people on there. The fact that you're 500 episodes deep, man, you've gotten in early on a lot of this stuff, whether it's the carnivore or the podcasting, all those things. So definitely give Casey a follow. Thank you so much for joining me today, man. I really appreciate your time and appreciate your insight, and I look forward to having you on. And maybe next time we can dive a little deeper in the nutrition piece, because I'd love to hear more about your carnivore journey. So thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for joining us, Casey. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you all again soon on the next episode of Exercise is Bullshit.
Thank you so very much for listening to this bonus episode of my recent appearance on the Exercise is Bullshit podcast with my good friend, Logan Herlihy. I hope you enjoyed that one. Like I said, it's interesting to listen back to my answers a year ago and maybe how I would have answered some of those questions today. I mean, even just a year ago, thinking about how far the conversation has gone about metabolic psychiatry even. I mean, we knew that metabolic psychiatry was a thing. It was on the come up, but even in this last year, we've made so much progress. I probably would have answered some of the questions along those lines as well. But anyway, the thing, again, that I like the most about Logan is he's willing to confront these things. Logan and I both practice a type of strength training called super slow, which is a very kind of high intensity style of training for weightlifting. Different than breathing heavy, getting sweaty, breathing from your mouth. Like I said, it's more like teaching you to go to a depth of intensity in the muscle fibers that is very close to what we call muscle failure. Anyway, if you would like to experience a session like that with me, you can always book a free complimentary 30-minute session from our website. If you go to myboundlessbody.com, you can click on the Book Now button, and we can show you virtually or in person, if you're in the Salt Lake area, how to execute those workouts, which, again, require a very high amount of intensity, but then give you a lot more free time because the workouts don't need to be done with a high frequency. You can do them once a week, maybe 20 or 30 minutes is really all you need. We can show you that, again, virtually or in person in the Salt Lake area if you go to our website, www.myboundlessbody.com. As always, if you don't mind, leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcast or subscribe to us on YouTube. We really appreciate all of you out there and hope you enjoyed this bonus episode of Boundless Body Radio.